energy.
They used their mind.
But they were regarded as ignorant, ancient savages. But ultimately, they didn't really need or want any of the stuff we have now, and ultimately, we don't need or want it either.
No, we learnt why we need it, but they hadn't learnt that yet.
This whole digitization of society is a sickness, and ultimately, people don't want it. They might be swimming in it, but they don't want it. It's just created a life of hell for everybody on Earth as they're trapped into this thing.
I think everyone can feel the pain of what it is to live in society as it has unfolded. And I think if you go back just 100 or 200 years, life might be harder, but it's certainly more peaceful.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that, back from my origins. Because basically the people that I learned from and grew up with, were all born at the turn of the century in 1900, and they, when I was a kid, I fed the chickens in the backyard that would end up being, for dinner that night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was all a closed loop thing. We were all self-sufficient.
Yeah, now children don't even know where their food comes from.
We didn't need pecking devices and maggot pods and silly phones and all that stuff. Why would you even want it? It would just be a distraction. There wasn't even a television in the house. The telephone rang maybe once or twice a month. Can you imagine such a world?
It'd be a bit boring, but
it wasn't boring.
Wouldn't be overwhelmed.
We were all quite content, just doing the things that were necessary to be alive and hanging out together.
I am playing devil's advocate slightly. Yeah. I mean...
The whole thing, the whole technological world is a giant neuroses.
And that the commercial world enables it, though, is what I'm saying.
Well, that's, that's what feeds it.
Yeah.
That's what science is about now, is to develop, new ways to enslave humanity. I had to deal with this when I was associated with that Lawrence Livermore crowd when I was there at Mare Island in San Francisco, the old Navy ship, Here, there's a nuclear engineer guy, Navy guy, and we're talking about stuff and all that, and, and he's interested in what I'm working on, and I'm interested in what he's worked on, but he doesn't want to talk about those type of things. He wants to talk about, enslaving humanity, and he believes that the duty of the engineer is to enslave humanity.
No, surely not.
Yeah, it came right out of his mouth. And then, I'm not going to say anything because it wouldn't do any good, but I was raised that was the duty of the engineer was to free humanity. So obviously there's some different ideas about that.
Yeah, obviously. I don't know who's
obviously my idea is not the popular one.
Not yet.
But that's what Tesla and Steinmetz thought they were doing. And it turned out it didn't work that way. That's why they all were bitter in the end. Same thing with Farnsworth.
Yeah.
Farnsworth lived long enough to see what kind of mess television turned into. He was horribly bitter about it. The guy died of his bitterness.
You're kidding.
He died of bleeding ulcers, alcoholism, and the whole Farnsworth family just fell apart. Philo his son was the same way. They were just all screwed up. People were hopelessly screwed up psychologically.
But they were great men, though, nonetheless.
Yeah, but what good did any of it do? They just created tools that enslaved humanity.
Well, maybe that's what made the Mayans and the Egyptians and these other old ancient cultures special, because they didn't do that. They didn't try and enslave humanity. And it shows in our own attitude in interpreting it and seeing it that we automatically assume that they must have, because none of us would bother to go to the effort of making such a vast monument, and none of us would bother to do that unless we were told to and enforced to. So it's kind of revealing in itself the way that we interpret things.
Yeah, well, those people didn't have to be forced if they wanted to do it. And that's how everybody felt, and that was, the mind state that this is. It was actually a bit like that, in when I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and it was made that at a very interesting era. In the engineering world and all that, there was this feeling of all these different avenues working together and advancement, and that was the whole, Bell Telephone Laboratories concept.
Yeah.
It wasn't that people were forced to do that stuff. It was exciting to do it.
Yeah.
It's the same situation I encounter, when I'm in a public utilities scenario, at the substation or something like that. Well, when I started this off, those people would spend a lot of time with me when I was young, showing me things and telling me things, and much later on, like with the Department of Water and Power, something's going on at the substation. Well, let's go over and hang out and see what's happening and learn some stuff. And some guy, we talk for a couple hours, about this experience and that experience, and they want to know about certain things that I knew and the questions and all that. Well, now those people they don't want to talk to you, and there's all these UN regulations that you got to keep so many feet away from this and that, and they're all running around like a bunch of neurotics, trying to ascertain the switch is off when you can see it's off. But they have to go through all these rituals like something you'd see in some kind of religious ceremony. And so they can't talk to you because it's not allowed, and they don't want to talk to you, and they don't want you around there, and they don't want to work on the substation. They just want to get a six-pack and go home and watch the game.
Yeah, so the community has emigrated.
So there's no driving element, so, there's no cohesion, so the whole society is just going to dissolve, like a dead caterpillar. It's just going to turn into some goo, and it's going to dry up, and it's going to blow away in the wind. No future for this society. It's in free fall.
Yes. A human caterpillar where every foot of the billions of feet represents one person. If all of the persons marching in different directions, then the caterpillar moves nowhere.
Right.
Right? That's what you're saying.
Yeah,
you can see that.
It's just like if every cell in your body decides it's going to do something different.
Yeah.
Then you won't have a body anymore.
Yeah, no constitution.
Right.
Yeah. It's as simple as that as well, really. Blimey. Sorry, it's 2 hours, 8 minutes, Eric, and I've got a couple of questions from Dr. Green and Matt again. Matt's reworded his question from last time with some help from Dr. Green. Dr. Green says his next question would be, continuing from the last one, clarifying some details. If the building containing the transmitter coil is about 7 meters away from the center of the garden, where a circle of 17 ground rods will be installed, and the earth cable connection leads to the rod that's in the center, there's going to be 7 meters of wire in between the coil and the earth terminal. What's the best conductor type of configuration to use for that 7 meter gap? Is it the same answer as last time, i.e. brass strip or a lot of thinner wires?
No, there's too much inductance. You can't use a straight piece of wire. It doesn't matter what it's made out of.
Okay.
It has to be a surface. And the surface can't be any skinnier than 1/3 its length.
Right.
So if you're going to try to operate with ground rods at a distance from the transformer, that's going to have to be done through a surface.
Right, like a plate.
Yeah, or a mesh of wires.
Right.
So at lower frequencies you can do that because the wavelengths are so large it can't see the gaps between the wires. So rather than having one giant copper cable for this type of stuff, that copper needs to be spread out into a surface. Mm-hmm. So if you have the same amount of copper, pounded out into a thin foil, that works much better for this than copper does in a lump because we're not dealing with conductivity.
Right.
Not in the normal sense.
Well, you're dealing with something that's on a surface.
On a surface, right.
Okay, and Dr. Green says, also I think that Matt's question last time before was about the radiant energy patent. He's basically asking, does a coil or TMT or any Tesla coil connected to the ground work as a radiant energy receiver?
No, you have to have a vacuum tube connected to it in order to be able to operate in that mode.
Oh, no kidding. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, I'm sure he'll be very happy with that.
Tesla really didn't use the word radiant energy. People have kind of put that in his mouth. It was radiant matter.
Right.
Which is a concept by Crookes.
Mm-hmm. Right. Another question. Don Best asks, is there information that can help the individual to become energy independent? If you have such information, is it possible to open source it?
The best energy independence is not to use energy.
Yeah, but that's cheating, surely.
So otherwise, you're stuck with it.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So
I have thoroughly dropped the free energy situation. So there's no free energy fuse box or magic device that that's going to save you so that you can drive your 6-wheel pickup truck around and not have to fill the gas tank.
No. That said, if the sun was twice as close, the Earth would be 4,000 degrees Celsius, though, right? So
yeah, I mean the thing is, you got highly efficient solar panels now, and that's all you need.
Enough. Yeah, that should be enough.
That's enough. That's all you need. You don't need anything else.
Okay. Here's another question. This is kind of out there question because it kind of falls into the conspiracy zone. I would like to know Eric's opinion on the Van Allen belt. Is it possible to fly directly through it on the way to the moon without the lead shield or some sort of shield to protect humans from radioactive radiation?
I can't particularly answer that because I don't have enough experience on the matter.
Okay.
I guess there's some ideas on, and stories that you can't go through certain parts or this. I'm not certain about that. So
no.
I haven't been there, and I don't know anybody that has been there. So I can't.
A very safe answer. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm running out of questions now. But is there anything that you would like to speak about, Eric? Kind of regarding EPD Labs, its future, kind of something that you'd like to be.
Well, I think
campaign.
what the interest for me was to be kind of along, what are we trying to get the money for and what we're trying to get done. But I think we've kind of already covered that.
Yeah.
Then otherwise, right now I'm just trying to get everything wrapped up and head for the woods so I can start concentrating on putting my presentation together and the car maintenance and all that type of stuff and clothes and everything I need to get together so that I can hit the road, and I'm in need of nothing.
Well, I hope it goes well and that you have a good time when you do hit the road. And thanks again so much for giving 2 hours of your time to speak to me about these things.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
Hopefully the campaign will do really well and you'll get the money to be able to at least show the public how the Tesla telluric earthquake technology works.
Yeah,
so I wish you much luck.
That's the plan by the end of the year, is to have a physical form standing in a concrete reality situation out here in the back. So
well, if it can be done,
it looks
we'll do
like
it.
all the pieces are there.
Yeah.
So that and a secure building and some kind of very basic laboratory type situation with some tools and test equipment, and then I can start doing something here other than writing.
And everyone's looking forward to that. I'm sure they can't wait to see some
Well,
videos.
pretty much the thing is, whatever money gets put in, there's plenty always comes back out. So this writing thing is in itself is a very, very large operation. It takes a lot of my time. It's very difficult. I wore myself completely out yesterday trying to get all the dimensions in the Thompson book to add up right. And because they leave that stuff out and they use all these goofy variables, and it's horribly frustrating and difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I have to go through weeks and weeks of this stuff, and then then I make some kind of breakthrough like I've reached now, where I've managed to take his kind of obscure, complicated stuff and turn it into simple geometric and algebraic expressions that anybody can understand. And I'm deriving all of these electrical terms from scratch, and the dimensions all work out, and everything corresponds to reality. Well, then that produces that sensation of excitement, and then it was worth the struggle.
Yeah, definitely. So I mean,
then it's time. Then it's time to start the next chapter and all over again.
So I mean, if people want to know more about these mathematical theories that you're going on about regarding Tesla's and Steinmetz's ideas in terms of representing waves, I mean, what are the books that you would recommend to them to kind of learn more about this? In terms of books that you've written.
Well, basically anything that Steinmetz has written is incredibly instructive. And what I recommend, granted, a lot of these books are just a sea of equations. But the thing is, if you take any of his books and you go through and you read the first 3 pages of every chapter, you will, at that point, probably know more about electricity than most people that think they know something about it.
Gosh.
So that's the advantage of Steinmetz. So, but then it's the whole overall, Heaviside's work, and then Thomson's work, and Tesla's work, and all that. I mean, the only thing you can do is go back and read these people's stuff. But
and
again,
it's not
the
like
problem
reading.
is going to be it's all of a very mathematical nature, or it's going to be a very experimental nature, and you have to do the experiments. And that's really the best way. Is if you want to know about this stuff, you're going to have to experiment with it. It's not just something, to talk about in the coffee shop. You're not going to have any knowledge talking about it. It's got to be part of your life. You have to be experimenting and building things and doing things. Otherwise, you're not going to learn anything about it. There's no reason to learn anything about it anyway if you're not going to do anything with it. So the stuff that I've written from the feedback I'm getting in the mail, I guess, is helping people immensely understand the basics of electricity. So ultimately, if you go back, and backtrack, from the very first Lone Pine writings to the most recent stuff, which is now coming out, it'll piece it all together. And then if you go back to the references, then you can learn more about it. But it's a lifelong process, and ultimately, you're going to have to learn algebra and geometry and a certain level of philosophy and all these type of things. And it's not just something you decide you're going to do for a few afternoons.
No, it's a lifelong kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it's a way of life. So the thing is, if you're interested in this stuff, the question is to ask yourself is, why are you interested in it? And then pursue that why by getting into it. You really have to get into it. So the people that seem to benefit the best from what I'm putting out are the people that are just graduating as engineers. Because they're kind of stuck with a cockeyed perception of reality. And they're, in an employment situation where it's the blind leading the blind, and they don't know which way to go. So,
but they're also receptive because they haven't been kind of brainwashed with a certain way of thinking. Yeah,
and it doesn't work. And I don't know. I mean, I watch this stuff go on. I just have to shake my head. Like this Lone Pine substation. Okay, the Lone Pine substation has a 2 million volt ampere reactive capacitor bank, which is a little large for that location, considering that the total kVA capacity of the substation is only a few times greater than the kVAR of the capacitor, and that's an undesirable situation to have two oppositely polarized electrical devices connected that close to each other, because you can get resonant transients and what have you. At any rate, that thing was there, and ultimately the magnetizing force it generated was needed 30 miles away, and that's where the capacitor bank belonged. But at any rate, it was at the Lone Pine substation, and there could be some justification because that's kind of the center of gravity of the power system for Southern Inyo. So at any rate, so one day I see they're in there pulling the capacitor bank apart. So I was fortunate enough, there was some old guy there, and he wanted to talk, and the rest of the crew wasn't there, so he, let me in, and I, read the data plates on the capacitors and ascertained that it was 2 megavars, and I explained to him that seemed a little large. When they would open the switch on the thing, the flames that come off the switch would scare the campers out of Portuguese Joe Campground right next to it. And, and that produces a lot of transients and all that, and it's just not good to have that much bulk kilovar. And he goes, well, they're going to put a bigger one in. That's what they have us doing. And I go, no. And he goes, yeah, we're going to double the capacity, increase it to 5 megavars, and my eyes roll back, and I'm going, well, I know, that's just, I don't want to, piss the guy off. And he goes, well, that's just what they want me to do. Okay.
That's what it seems to come down to.
They need the KVAR there at Crystal Geyser, which is the water bottling plant, which is the biggest power user in southern Owens Valley. Yeah. And but that's 30 miles away. The capacitors belong there. I wasn't going to get. I didn't want to piss the guy off, but he wasn't an engineer. He was the guy, building the stuff and all that. So, so at any rate, they put this thing in, and I was gone for a while, and I came back, and I noticed the switch was open, and I would expect that it was going to be open because I know the first time they closed that thing, all hell was going to break loose, and probably half the electronics in Lone Pine was going to get glitched by some transient. So it stayed open. And so when I was at the Division Creek Power Plant, I was talking to the guys there, and I was remarking about, what's going on. You don't have an engineering department anymore. Somebody must have been crazy. And the guy laughed, and he goes, yeah, they turned that thing on, and it overvoltaged the substation, tripped everything out, and that was the end of that. And I go, well, there's something a little funny here. Being that it's made of individual units, you could always pull the fuses out of the excess capacitors and make it the same size as before. But nobody thought about that. So the thing sat there turned off. That's the world of electrical engineering today. Now, do you want to graduate and go into that work environment?
No.
Where everything you do is going to be wrong, and if you say anything about it, you're going to be, ostracized from the deal.
I know what that's like. I've worked for the government, so it's pretty it's de-inflating,
Well, the whole utility structure of this country is going that route. It's like some kind of psychosis has entered the situation, and it's almost like things are deliberately being put together wrong. It's its own study. It really is its own study. In fact, it's something that's expected of me. But, I just, it's a whole other deal that I can't take on right now, and I'm not, in my present state of mind, I'm not into marching into, district offices and talking to the, this guy and that guy and all that type of stuff. All I want to do is run off to my hole and never come back out. But I'm going to have to, my part of my job here in this municipality is to come up with an engineering report that says why are these things going on, and it appears to be that it's basically just going to be a mass psychosis.
Well, I mean, when all the lights are out, they better get their psychosis together, because it's going to be much more hectic than what you've described. It's going to be much worse. When was the last time the whole country blacked out? Not for a while.
I mean, the thing is increasing in complexity, and it's becoming increasingly overloaded, and it's becoming less and less stable. And then, if you have one thing that's put in wrong, in one utility company, which, has several other things also put in wrong, and the other utility companies are going to have things wrong, and then everything's going to be all wrong together, and then it's going to magnify its wrongness by intercommunicating its wrongness between its various elements, which is basically what's going on, and the waveforms are becoming harsher and harsher and filled with more interference and destructive transients, and it's the same thing with the communication system. It's all distorted and unreliable, and it's just eventually it's just going to seize. The whole thing's going to seize. The people that work on it, they don't want to work on it. The stuff that they work on is all screwed up and ugly looking and stupid, and they're being told to do the wrong thing, and they're all sick and screwed up on monster drinks and chicken things that they live on, and it's just all going to fly apart. The whole thing. It's coming into a grand convergence of wrongness until the whole thing's just going to take one big giant squat, and then everybody's going to go out for a zombie hunt and kill each other. What we believe we call poultricide. Right. The final rage. The day the silly phones go off, it's already been determined that if you deprive somebody from their maggot pod or their silly phone, they start to go into a violent psychosis.
You're kidding.
Yeah.
See, that's why I got rid of it, because they didn't seem to make me happy. They just seemed to make me more busy.
Yeah. What this technology does is isolates people, and it makes it more prone for people to be in states of disagreement. That's what's been determined. And what's odd is it's actually. The telephone, which was considered an advancement over the telegraph, is now we're in a retrograde situation, because when you peck on your pecking device, that's a telegraphic communications. The telephone is giving way back to the telegraph, and the telegraph is a much more bandwidth consumptive form of information conveyance than the analog telephone is. So you can take a channel bank. You can take a channel bank for analog telephone multiplex of 24 channels, and that will occupy 96 kilocycles of bandwidth. But then you can take a digital channel bank for the same 24 channels, and that gives you 1.58 megacycles of bandwidth. That's quite an increase in bandwidth.
Yeah. And if you're paying 95th percentile, that's going to hurt.
So the main advantage of the digitizing is so the material can be quantified and routed for surveillance purposes.
Right.
Because
that's why they're using it inefficient.
So you have to remember that every time you put something on a CD out of your computer or whatever, and you mail it to somebody and they put it to the computer, what you see on the computer screen is not the entirety of what's on the CD. It is supervisory data that goes along with it. And this supervisory data is moving along with what you're trying to send. And it can cause all these other complications. So with analog, if you take, if you're going to send a picture digitally, you're sending it with the supervisory material. So that they did start doing that with TV, the televisions in the early 70s, and it used to be this little digital code that you normally couldn't see because it was off to the edge of the screen, and that was a way that they could use that TV channel also to send some low-level telegraphic information.
Yeah, I think it's called, is it framing? You've got a signal inside a signal. Yeah,
it's called the supervisor. It's the same thing with the telephone. There's supervisory signals that accompany the actual talking path to let you know that the phone is off the hook, or that you've dialed the wrong number, or whatever kind of. So there's all these other signals. It's called the supervisory channel.
Right.
So for the basic, telephone, because I have an actual real Western Electric Bell telephone. I wouldn't own another type of telephone because the thing was designed to work under all circumstances, whether it be a weapon in a domestic dispute or the town was under nuclear attack. The telephone was still going to work no matter what. But this silly phone stuff has got an active supervisory channel constantly, whether you're using it or not.
Whoa.
It's always on. You can't turn it off. The only way to stop it is you have to put it in a completely enclosed metallic box with a snap-on lid. There can't be even the smallest gap for the wavelengths to squeeze their way out. And then the thing will probably kill itself trying to communicate to the outside world. So all this stuff is it's the same thing with the automobiles. So they're packed with all this surveillance and supervisory technology.
So
it's a surveillance society where everything you do is going to be digitized and quantified, and basically there will be a supreme intelligence of malevolent nature engaged in the activity of every human being on the planet.
This isn't what Tesla meant by the teleautomaton, is it?
So, I'm pretty well out of that. I have a car that was made all the way back in 1980, and I have a real telephone, and I don't use any of these devices, and I don't use the internet, and I tend to, send letters and pictures and not, text messages and all that kind of stuff. So I don't particularly have a lot of supervisory channels in my existence here on Earth. On top of that, I cannot tell you where I'm going to be 3 days from now. I have no idea.
That's a lovely thing. That's called freedom.
I have no idea whatsoever. Kind of have an idea, but right now there's so many things going on. There could be 1,000 miles of difference between, one idea or another idea. And that's actually the way we're supposed to live.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what George Orwell would say if he saw the kind of world that has been created. I mean, I was born in 1984, so...
Yeah. Well, 1984 was basically an adaptation, a turnaround of the year 1948. That was his idea of when this world socialism was born, and that's true. So after World War II, the world was readjusted into accepting this international socialism. One world, one card.
And there's nothing wrong with the whole one world order, one government. It's just the fact that when that happens, people tend to be human, and absolute power is absolutely corrupting. I mean, that's the kind of political message that I get from the whole routine.
Well, it would amaze you the levels of dismality capable of the human species, how far and deep and twisted it can go. Because for the most part, you and me and the people who are listening and all that are pretty, well-centered, normal people that don't have any extreme perversions or malevolence or any of that type of stuff. But we only represent about 30% of the human population.
Yeah.
There's stuff going on, in various basements right now, and in various cells and in various, secret laboratories and in various offices and whatever, that's so twisted and so sick. Well, it's like these people running around, chopping people's heads off with saws. Those are obviously some very sick people. And their sickness has become a dominant force. And it's very much part of the way the world operates, mainly because there's too many people. So the human species is just becoming increasingly homicidal. It's just the natural nature response because there's too many humans.
Well, I mean, if you fill my house up with a whole bunch of people, sooner or later everyone gets a little bit annoyed. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
There's no way that I could live where you live. It would be impossible.
I live in London. Yeah.
Mostly because of the British government is the worst when it comes to surveillance and restriction and all that kind of stuff. Most of what I do, I could not do there. America is the only place where I can still go off on some Jeep trail 200 miles off in the middle of nowhere and live the rest of my life out there where I park my car. You cannot do that anywhere else in the world, either because you can't navigate the terrain because it's dense jungle filled with highly toxic snakes, or it's all urbanized, or it's got a big giant fence around it. So Europe, that place is all bottled up. It only can be socialist. Everything that you do is going to be dictated by society. That's what socialism is. You do not make any decisions in your life. Society decides how you're going to live. The people came to America to get away from that. And originally, the people that fled that scene over there and came here were the more positive species of people, and they tend to cooperate with the species of humans that were already here, and it became very productive for a while. But then, unfortunately, the negative elements started to migrate here and could thrive, to a higher level in its tweaked reality here, just like the positive one could, because there was more freedom to do stuff here. And so now America is a place where you're free to be deranged and screw up and take advantage of other people, and basically you can be a piece of human garbage in America, and that's what's freedom. There is no other freedom other than you're free to be a piece of human garbage. That's it. And if you try doing that in in Hungary or Czechoslovakia or somewhere else, with a knife in your belly. But in America, you can get away with it because that's what America's all about. And that's the whole thing's turned upside down. Is what's happened.
Yeah.
So it's where you're free to be scum.
You're free to do nothing.
Yep. You're free to screw something up or screw somebody up. And that's what your life's aims are going to be, whether it's symbolically through a game or whether it's robbing your neighbor. That's freedom in America.
True enough. Yeah.
Otherwise, the only freedom you have in America is the freedom to pay.
Mm-hmm.
And you have one right. That's the right to remain silent.
Yeah. It's probably better off with a system that you've got over there, judicial system. It's not exactly perfect from what I hear.
Oh, the whole thing is just totally predatory and racial and tweaked and whatever. The only advantage is there's still enough of America left that's like the original, because there's no people. And there's no social. There's none of that. You can just go live.
Well, America's a lot younger, which is probably why it's not in the same state as England. It's younger as a kind of civilization.
Yeah, it's kind of a half civilization. In America, it's not a pinnacle of civilization. It's actually kind of takes pride in being uncivilized. But then, that again then turns into part of the problem. So there's really, it's becoming less civilized. It's a very uncivil place.
Yeah, I get
crudeness and vulgarity and aggression and gluttony and all the rest of it.
Yeah, kind of New Yorkian.
Yeah, well, New York is like the nucleus of it. It's a disease, is what it is. If it stayed in its own boundaries, it'd be fine. But it decided to come out here for a conquest in the West, and that's how we ended up with Commonweal and all the rest of this stuff. Those are all conquering New Yorkers. Their statement is when they barge into your camp and and have no respect for you and your hole, is they turn around and tell you should find a less nice place to stay. This place is too nice for you. You should go somewhere else. That's what they told us when they came and took over Bolinas. This place is too nice for you, so you can go away.
Ridiculous. I mean, they don't give a damn about Bolinas anyway. They don't give a damn about it. Otherwise, they'd have made more effort to repair the antenna structure that was falling down, no?
Oh, no. They have their little Einsteinian world there, believe me, and they're very proud of it. And, they're all 1 foot out of the grave. They're all old and getting ready to die, but nevertheless, they're very proud that they screwed everything up there. That's their job. And it's their little empire, and it's their little racial purity zone and whatever, and no one else is allowed there. It's theirs.
Did they not actually take over the Bolinas building as well?
They took over everything. Everything. They destroyed everything they could get their hands on.
Yeah.
They ran everybody out of town. Okay? They caused one of my friends to commit suicide. They drove another friend of mine's girlfriend insane. They drove Philo insane. These are vicious people with this cute little smile on their face. We call it perma-smirk.
Yeah.
Like Bill Clinton.
Yeah, I know
That's one of their crowd, the Clintons.
It's called the intentional smirk.
Just smirk. Constant. You could sock them with lineman boots square between the legs, okay? With 100 G's of force, and that smirk will just be grit teeth that just can't get it off their face. But then, if you observe them from a distance, where they finally get in a situation where they don't think anybody's looking at them, then the smirk will go away. But as soon as the human around, it just snaps on automatically. It's kind of like a little pilot light, it's time to smirk. This little smirk, this part of their little cute little reality. They when they first invaded, they called themselves the beautiful people.
Right.
They didn't. They didn't turn out to be so cute.
In metaphor rather than literalism.
But they're so they're so spiritual, caring, and they just really have that like petting the chicken before you cut its head off. They're really good at that kind of mode of operation. They're so soothing,
I know exactly the kind of people you're talking about, believe me.
Yeah.
Very good description. I'm sure everyone knows what you mean. There is such thing as malevolence in the universe, and I think that's probably it.
So, so basically what I had to do, was to move to some of the most horrible desert in the country, with some of around the nastiest and toxic people, and because the beautiful people don't want to come here. So it's either one or the other. It wasn't my plan to leave the conifer forest, and my giant radio cathedral built by Marconi and all the rest of that stuff, where I was completely self-sufficient. And everything was there in one spot. I didn't have to drive 1,000 miles to go find some Douglas fir trees to live in, like I do now. But it was too nice for me. I didn't belong there, even though, God and nature had a different plan, and I was exactly what was supposed to be there. That wasn't important to them.
Yeah,
it didn't matter, that 5 or 6 generations led to the construction of that facility, and I was the next one, because it was in their way.
I think free people don't smirk, Eric. They're not free, which is why they smirk. The way you live defines your difference.
Yeah.
And as long as you keep on living the way you do, you'll always be different. I think the worst thing is to become your enemy, or become the person that makes themselves your enemy. So as long as you keep on doing the great work that you're doing, I think people like myself will continue to respect you for it.
Well, I guess the whole world can't be totally screwed up if I got the level of support I got. So that must mean there's some level of interest out there. So when I go back to the post office and I got 30 letters there, then that kind of gives me a little more encouragement that the human race is not just one big toilet bowl filled with all kinds of nasty stuff floating in it.
Yeah, big time. I mean, all fires start with a spark, even healing ones.
So I think that's the remarkable thing I encountered when I was officiating that historic Navy ship at Mare Island, is how people of all walks of life would become transformed when they got on the ship, because the thing was alive and working, and it was real. It wasn't virtual. And on top of that, they could actually take part in working on it. In other words, somebody would show up and they would want to, tour the ship, and they might have had their truck out there with their tools or whatever, and they might have had some wrench I needed or some specific tool or whatever, and then they got involved. An amazing effect it had on people. So,
yeah, it's community. Whatever happened to it? Really, it's just like you say, people are disconnected. Yeah,
and accordingly, I was forced off the ship by the Greenpeace axis, which wants to deny people these experiences, particularly anything that involves the United States Navy.
Yeah, I'd be quite suspicious about that, but regulating the Navy isn't a new thing, is it? That's something.
Well, the Navy has its own problems, and limitations and complications and derangements and whatever. But the thing is, it's in the best interest of the public, and it's in the best interest of the Navy to have these, discarded facilities available to the public, and also available to the Navy, because it helps, the continued training of the Navy people. It causes people to want to join the Navy. It's a positive thing for the Navy to have something, out there that where people can actually, that aren't Navy can get involved with it and experience it and learn what it's about. The Navy, of course, is the whim of whatever administration's in power. So it gets to, have that shit on its face, whatever color it may be, whether it's Bush or Clinton or anybody else. But nevertheless, it is an organization. It involves all this architecture and genius and all these incredible things, and people are fascinated by that stuff, and the people should be able to partake in it. But this society suppresses that type of stuff. It wants to keep people separated. It's not the Navy that wants to keep it separated. It's another group of people that wants to make sure it stays separated, and that the only contact that people are going to have with these vessels and installations is something very convoluted and layered with all of this political crap. It's like when Greenpeace took over the RCA station and slammed the door in my face. Well, basically, they used the transmitters to transmit Greenpeace propaganda, not the history of the station or not any services to the maritime community.
It's a bit like commercial consolidation. It only results in the power of the people being taken away and them having to subscribe to a corporate system that really they do not want.
It's basically a form of mind control. So like I said, but the definition of the purpose of Commonweal is they are a social policy organization. And their neo-paganism and all the rest of the little fruitcake ideas they have in their head, they're going to make this world policy. That's their aim.
Doesn't it feel like sometimes they work out what it is they want to do before they figure out what the policy is going to be?
Yeah, this stuff's all very, very premeditated.
That's what I mean. They kind of work. They don't work up a policy that's good. They work out what they want to do, and then they figure out what kind of policy is going to let them do that.
Yeah, it's like this carbon dioxide thing, greenhouse gases and all that. The whole thing's an absurdity. But it's turned into this global policy, with all these people. The peacocks all lined up at the table with their chests puffed out and their feathers, talking nothing but garbage. Meanwhile, real problems are not being dealt with. So now, basically, it's against the law to say anything against these policies. It's like this Holocaust thing now carried to the nth degree. It's actually, it's basically tacitly established that, if somebody speaks out against this stuff, they're a hater or a terrorist. If you don't believe in global warming, you do not believe that there is relativity, and you do not believe in Darwinism. This is right out of the Los Angeles Times, out of the mouth of the editor, Eddie Hartzenstein. This should be regarded as a hate crime.
Yeah.
In other words, if I don't believe in relativity, I'm a hater, and I'm a racist. That's what Eddie Hartzenstein says.
What's the point of having freedom of opinion if really your options are intentionally limited so that you think that you're free, but you're really not? What's the point? That's a lie. People aren't going to accept it forever, are they?
Hey, you're free to drink beer and watch the game.
Yeah, well, I don't like football.
But that's all you're free to do.
Yeah.
You're not free to go drive somewhere 500 miles away and disappear for 3 months. You can't do that.
No. That's a nice thought, though.
No, you're in servitude. Every person in this society is in servitude. So the only way to get around the servitude is to eliminate the overhead. So you don't have any expenses and you don't need to serve.
Live to earn to live.
Yeah, or become independently wealthy. You either got to go one way or the other. You got to eat out of garbage cans, or you have to be rich. If there's anything in between, it's not happening. So, that's what I determined way back. I finally said, to hell with this. I'm not getting anything out of it. I just walked out the door and walked off in the horizon and spent the years thereafter just living out of dumpsters. And actually it turned out to be a much, after the break-in period, you know,
Yeah.
it
It's much
it
more
wasn't as
peaceful
bad
than
as
the
Navy
crap
boot
you had.
camp. So that's something to say about it, you know. It
Yeah.
had its harshnesses, but it was the best time of my life. That's when I got into this writing, you know, stuff and relearning engineering and all that. That was the point that began because that's all there was to do.
Yeah. Well, it's like you see these videos, you know, like popular videos, viral videos on YouTube where there's this homeless person, a person pretending to be homeless in the streets of New York, and everyone goes past for like 3 or 4 hours. They're absolutely freezing. They haven't got any proper clothes. It's snowing. The only person that stops is what? Another homeless person. That kind of explains to you the way that people are just so wrapped up in their own thinking, or what they've been told to believe, or what they think they believe. There's just no community, no realism.
Now, everybody is just turned into their own little god.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what's
It's a
happening.
shame.
Everyone is their own little god. Their little isolated god, you know, in a Brownian motion of other little isolated gods.
So, I mean, if we were an ant nest, if humanity was an ant nest and the anteater was coming, the anteater would be completely shocked to find the nest so ununified, completely ignores the attacker, too busy attacking each other. Completely irrelevant. No, you see, these guys are leftists and they're really bad, so therefore we need to destroy... It's just madness.
Well, that's kind of how it works.
This really
you keep people isolated and you keep them in this constant state of despair, and then they're easy to feed on. Because, you know, out of the misery and despair and sickness is then, you know, it's great profits for doctors and lawyers. So for the doctors and lawyers, it's important that people be sick and in trouble all the time, because you can feed off of that.
Yeah, I mean, things like sugar and the way that sugar is used in culture probably make dentists quite a lot of profit, I would imagine.
Yeah, well, it's sugar and white bread and you know, a continually acid body pH, and then the consumption of carrion on top of that.
Oh, and I mean, the point is, as soon as we're at a point where we can look after our teeth and they will last 100 years, we resort to damaging them on purpose, because we can protect them with mouthwash and fluoride and other dangerous chemicals.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the thought, you know, that when the human being learns that he can have fillings and that things can be replaced, then he goes, okay, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah, then you don't have to take responsibility for your action because there's someone there that's going to wipe your rear end for you.
Right.
You know, that's the whole thing, you know, with this socialist society is that eventually you expect that society is going to take care of you and you do not have to take responsibility for your actions.
It's a fascinating subject of study. Well, it's turned out to be 3 hours.
Yeah.
After all,
kind of strayed pretty far away from electrical engineering, but
that's true. I'll have to prepare more questions. I wasn't very prepared, so I was kind of winging it for the last 2 hours there.
Yeah.
I promise next time I'll prepare lots of questions, and I'll get like Dr. Green and Aaron to kind of contribute a little bit more in terms of what I can talk about, what I should talk about, because I think if I have more questions...
Well, I think, you know, people are interested in the general subject, so... But, you know, yeah. I really am not entirely excited about, you know, presenting myself as a philosopher to the public and then imposing my philosophy, you know, out on a situation and all that. I'd much rather talk about, you know, the nature of the things I'm working on, but then, of course, those things are so abstract and... you know, that people aren't necessarily interested in learning about my struggles trying to get the dimensions to work out, you know, in J.J. Thomson's equations.
Well, that's probably one of the most interesting things that you could talk about, so I think that people will follow. It's just a case of me, I have to get more questions next time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to do more research because I've been a lot of stuff has been going on at home, so I apologise for slightly... rushed interviews, slightly unprepared.
Well, it's sometimes it's good just to let things take their course. So, So the determination will be, is how is it received when it's put out. So at any rate, it's all kind of experimental.
Well, the last one was really well received. I mean, like over 1,000 people looked at it. 39 people liked it. Only one person disliked it.
Yeah, well, I was hoping I could piss off more people than that.
Oh, don't worry, I'm sure you'll have your opportunity. Well, thanks again, Eric. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm way past juice time, so I gotta get my orange juice. Try to get this thing done before Miller time.
Yeah, keep on keeping on.
Yep.
I'll speak to you soon. All right, thank you, Eric.
Okay, thank you. I'll talk to you later.
All right, cheers.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Bye.